Welcome back, Tribe. We're here today with special guest Benjamin Raven Pressley, author, martial artist, and wilderness skills survival instructor. Benjamin, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great, Bart. It's good to be here.
Good. I'm glad to have you on, Benjamin. And, or I should say Raven. Raven, tell me, we're going to get started talking today about your book. You were kind enough to send it to me, and I read through it. I loved it. It was a great read. I recommend people read it. It's a very different, you are very clearly, from your writing, a Christian man, but a very different interpretation of spirituality than what most people, I think, would put forth. And it really interested me, and I wanted to get you on the show to talk about it. And can you please, to begin with, let's go ahead and get a little bit of background about who you are, and then tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, I'm an author, been writing and kind of a deep thinker and philosopher for a long time. I've wrote several different books, actually. I write a fantasy series called Raven Quest, and it's got a lot of my philosophy and spirituality, built into it, and along with knowledge of my survival skills too. I'm a survival skill teacher. Been teaching survival skills, outdoor survival skills since 1986. I've been in as far as martial arts. I've been in Taekwondo and Kempo, mostly Kempo, but also a while in an American hybrid too called Haite Lane Kong. But it's a pretty good style. I liked it because it was real hard driving, real hard workout and stuff like that. But generally I've come a long way in life. Even you mentioned I was a Christian and all. Even that term I kind of even stray away from because of the negative connotations on it. I just believe that I do follow chiefly the teachings of Jesus Christ, but Christianity and, in general is, I'm not, dispersing the ones that are doing good work and all that stuff, but Christianity in a lot of ways is misunderstood, and it's a religion, and it has become a denomination, and like a lot of religions, trying to control people on a certain level. And, so I try to, I'm just a follower of Christ, and, consider myself to be a very open-minded spiritual person. But I believe it culminates in a lot of maybe teachings of Christ. So maybe that's something we can talk about today.
So, Benjamin, tell me about the book that you sent me. And this is about true spirituality. What inspired you to write this book? And tell me what are some of the teachings that you put forward in this book that you want people to learn?
Well, true spirituality, right off the bat, like I say, religion has historically been to control people. It has been, to me, it's been human beings creating God in their own image, and an image that suits them and that usually benefits their selfishness and their self-righteousness. But I just believe that true spirituality has nothing to do with religion or any particular set of beliefs. It's an all-encompassing view of life, and it's not denying things that are more connected than we want to accept. I just believe things are so connected in a spiritual way. There's a dimension that I think that a lot of people don't miss sometimes, because we want to think we know we're physical beings, we know we're social beings, we know we're mental beings, but very often the spiritual aspect is left out of that, but it's undeniable. I mean, we're connected to in such a great way, and it seems like our society and culture and even religion in general, even though religion says they want to get you closer to God and to who you are spiritually, in a lot of cases it does just the opposite, because we need to, because you can't be so narrow-minded that your particular church denomination is the only one that's right. Because true spirituality carries over in every aspect of life. I mean, it's not something you stir up or pay up or wind up. You can't just take God off the shelf and Sunday and wind him up and then just live any way you want the rest of the week. I think that in my Native American beliefs, I'm Cherokee by heritage, and many Native American tribes, including Cherokee, though, they acknowledge the fact that everything that we did was a prayer. Every step that they made was a prayer. They didn't have to, the people that seem the most spiritual that I've studied didn't necessarily have to have a certain posture or fold their hands or a certain form or a certain religion, and they seem to be more spiritual. I mean, Native Americans, they didn't have all that stuff like that. They did everything they did. They just had this awareness, that this mindfulness, as it's called in Buddhism, that they're aware that everything around them had the life of the Creator in it, and and they realized it carried over to every aspect of their life. It was like the air that they breathed. I mean, they no more considered anything that they did to be less spiritual than another thing. So spirituality is not just praying. It's not just rituals. It's not any particular religion. It's just something that comes alongside everything you do and every thought you think and everything you see. It becomes like a filter through which you view all things on a level that just makes sense. And my book, when I started writing this book, I wanted to just try to attempt to say, well, how does it all fit together? And I realized that the more that I thought about that and thought about what true spirituality is, then I had to really break down the history of humans and their interaction with one another. And I'm a history buff anyway. And also the survival skills that I teach is basically prehistoric skills. And it made me realize just more and more how connected things were and how much they made sense and how it does all fit together. And, because, think about it. It's like, for example, the Native American, I'm particularly familiar with, when the Christian missionary come over here, they told them to cut their hair, change their name, dress like an Englishman, and then they could have what they had to offer, but the Native Americans were very spiritual people, but they, and for the most part, I actually ran into a lot of Christian denominations that said, all Native Americans went to hell, and anybody that didn't before the missionary all went to hell. And I'm like, well, how can that be? Because, if God's our creator of all human beings, then they had some type of exposure to God. They might have called him by different names, like Great Spirit and Grandfather, and there's lots of names, that they used, but there's also lots of names that a lot of cultures use. But I believe that many cultures were experiencing God, experiencing this all surrounding spirituality. Unfortunately, a lot of times when you get, if you want to start an argument, just talk about religion or philosophy, or politics, and it shouldn't be that way. I think that initially we just need to acknowledge ourselves that we are spiritual beings, that there is part of us and are part of the balance. You talk about a lot in martial arts and yin yang and Buddhism and different disciplines like that. That's a philosophy I feel very strongly about, because if you go too much, if you spend too much time socially, like internet, Facebook, whatever, then, you're out of balance. If you spend too much time physically, you might get obsessed with your appearance. You're out of balance. If you spend too much time mentally, you become real cerebral and out of touch. You're out of balance. You can even become too spiritual. So heavenly minded, you're no earthly good, as they say. So it's about balance. It's very much about balance. And I think that we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. We have to consider what other cultures, that sensible ones that believe what they believe. There's some extreme cults and stuff, like we're experiencing with Islam today and that kind of thing. But the people though that were sincere and spiritual seekers on a spiritual journey, we got to consider what they say and see how it all fits together. So that's what I guess I attempted in my book, is just try to fit it all together, and get people to just open up the conversation on the subject again, and how important it is without any kind of denominational or religious slants to it. So
now, Benjamin, if I may ask, tell me, Raven, what is your personal slant? Because from my understanding, my reading of your book, it comes across that you are a Christian, or as you phrased it, maybe a better said, a follower of the teachings of Jesus Christ. Tell me about your personal views on Jesus, on how his teachings affect your personal spirituality, and maybe clear up some of the things that you feel might be misconceptions that other people have about Jesus Christ.
Okay. Well, I've looked into a lot of different disciplines of religion stuff: Buddhism, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, several of the Christian denominations, I've looked really honestly and open-minded and objectively tried to consider, all of them. But to me, the thing that made the teachings of Christ just made more sense to me than any of those, like the karma and reincarnation. That just didn't connect with me. But it's like when Jesus Christ came on the scene, it's like he drew a line in the sand. He didn't. One statement that he made was just very profound when he said, "I didn't come to destroy Moses and the prophets, but I came to fulfill." And I feel like that affected me deeply, because I was like, that's it. When Christ came on the scene, he was basically uniting and basically telling everybody, here's the line in the sand. Everything you believed, all your efforts have been sincere. And I recognize that. Even your faith is counted as righteousness. But I want to lead you to connect you back to your Creator. I want to connect you back to God. And the things that he taught were so universal. They've been twisted into a lot of different ways to control a lot of people and to keep down certain people, the population, particularly women and stuff, but in some cases, but that perfected me profoundly. And the more that I studied his teachings and then the apostles' teachings in the books that follow, with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and book of Romans especially, and how they started explaining how it all connected together. It just made sense to me, and so I can't help but think, with respect to all sincere truth seekers, that what Jesus said, he was the way, the truth, and the life. I believe that. He didn't come to create another religion. The only people he had trouble with is religious people at the time. They were the ones that resisted him. They were the ones that gave him a difficult time. But Christ was basically saying, I'm coming to unite all this, but I've got to clear up some stuff. And I think that he brought forth truth in such a way that he was able to say, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He didn't say, I am a way, another truth, another. He said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And that kind of either makes him a lunatic or it makes him who he said he was. I believe, and I firmly believe that he was who he said he was. That he was the Son of God that was sent in human form, our Creator taking on human flesh and coming down on our level to speak with us, and I profoundly believe it. I believe if you really study the scriptures for yourself, don't just read every book and don't just listen to every preacher, and especially the ones just wanting your money and that kind of thing. Just read it open-mindedly, and I think you'll feel the truth that's there coming through. Because Christianity, especially it to me that something affected me about it was it's the only belief system that says we can't do it on our own. That we need help. We need the power of the Creator, of His Spirit, the Holy Spirit, as it talks about in the Bible, to come alongside us and to empower us and to help us to overcome and be able to live a life that is impossible. We need to live a life that is beyond our selfishness, beyond our lust, beyond our own ability. But every other belief system, it's all about you got to do this, you got to do that. And you might get reincarnated in a better form, or you might. And the whole thing of karma, or the Mormons, they believe, you might get your own planet and become a god, and it just goes on and on from one thing to another. But basically, it just made so much sense to me that our place here in this world and the way that Christ taught, is all of us can relate to. When they asked him about the Ten Commandments, there was like 1,500 laws that were added to the Ten Commandments. It was so impossible for people to live in that time in the Mideast, that by the Pharisaical laws, Moses laws, and they asked Jesus, what do you say? And he said it could all be summed up in two things. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and treat your neighbor as yourself. And he said, on all this, he said, hangs the law. And when you really think about that, that's such a profound statement, because it doesn't. You don't have to flesh it out. You don't have to explain that. If I truly treat my neighbor as myself, and if I truly walk in awareness of God the Creator is on my side and not against me, then that just changes everything. It affects. Nobody has to tell me not to steal or kill or or any of those things, you know. I mean, and you know that just, you know, that to me it just makes more sense. Overall, that I've viewed it, this makes sense. I believe it. So I believe and follow his teachings, you know, just, you know, more than any other teaching. I mean, he even said, he got to the root of things, like, yeah, you know, he said, it's written that you should not murder. And he said, but I tell you, if you hate your brother, then you've committed a murder. You know, and he wasn't saying you actually physically committed murder and you was going to go to hell for committing murder. That ain't what he's saying. He's trying to teach a principle that it starts in our mind. It starts in our thoughts. We have to hate someone before we murder them. He said, you look on a woman, you commit adultery with her already in your heart. You didn't commit adultery. What he's trying to teach is a principle that starts with your eyes, it starts with your thoughts, you know, and then it becomes and it grows into something that you want to do, and you become obsessed with, and you might eventually commit adultery. You know, he's saying just, you know, control your mind, control your thoughts. You know, apostles taught it a lot. Transform your mind by the renewing, you know, of your thoughts. And I think that's in harmony with many cultures, you know, if you really apply it.
And Raven, tell me, because you know the tribe is very dedicated to developing warriorship, how do you view the role of spirituality in the warrior lifestyle? What are your thoughts as a warrior yourself? What role does it play? Could you even be a true warrior or live a warrior lifestyle without spirituality?
I believe being a warrior is spiritual first before it's anything else. I mean, I think that you know, people in Raven Tribe understand that, and you understand that probably more than anyone. That's one thing I like about the Facebook page you got and the group you got started yet. You know, because I mean, it does go deeper than that. It goes beyond it. I mean, in our society, we think warrior, then we might think, you know, army. We might think about the martial arts fighting, but we're thinking more of how they physically interact with the world. You know, but a warrior, I mean, one thing that I was, you know, impressed with, and that'll be a good example of this is, you know, a lot of people, like when my son, when he was coming up, you know, he was bullied quite a bit in about fifth, sixth grade and stuff. And I wanted to give him martial arts, and there's people that told me, oh, well, that, you know, he's going to bully them back, you know, and you know, that's not a good idea because it makes a brawler out of you. But, you know, I knew better because I was martial arts. I said, no, it's just the opposite. You know, I said, you take your strength and you bring it under control. And that's the spiritual aspect of it, because it did just the opposite. I mean, more times than not, it was like, yeah, he defended himself when he needed to, you know, but he could also just smile and walk away from a fight if he wanted to, because he knew he didn't have nothing to prove. He knew he had the ability to be able to beat them physically, but he was able to weigh it out, you know. So I think, you know, in martial arts that's taught. I mean, that's very strongly runs through the warrior creed, if you like. It's a very spiritual thing. I think that we have got to connect to that spiritual side of us anytime that we're, you know, that higher thinking, that higher order, when we decide if we're going to engage with someone, if we're going to, if we don't, I mean, it's like, I mean, I've been like more than once, to a couple times at least, in a parking lot where I saw a woman being abused, you know, and being pushed around in some big store parking lot, you know, and I intervened, you know, but, you know, someone that maybe did not have that spirituality, you know, to the side of their warrior side, they might have said, well, it ain't my problem, you know. But I mean, when you're that connected, and you want to defend those that are innocent, you want to defend those that are less able to defend themselves. You know, I think all that comes under the category of spirituality, in my opinion, because spirituality, you know, causes us to think on a deeper level. We realize that, and if we're spiritual people, that all things are connected, that all things are valuable. You know, every plant, every animal, every human being. You know, it doesn't, and all the differences start fading away. It isn't important about gender. It isn't important about, you know, what color you are. It isn't important even what, you know, sexual orientation you are or anything. You know, whether you agree with this or that or not, it's irrelevant, because everybody becomes equal, and we respect all life because we know all things were, as they were created, they were connected, and they're all in balance, or they wouldn't be there. There's a reason for them. And to dismiss any other, you know, culture or someone because they're female or because they're another color, it's just crazy. I mean, we miss out on a whole volume of knowledge and gifts that they have to contribute by oppressing, that particular group of the population, just because we don't agree with their views, And I'm not talking about, like I say, about harmful views, like that are terrorists or something like that. But so I think that the spiritual path of the warrior is very much so. I mean, even the samurai, back in their days, they said they weren't afraid to die because they had already embraced death. That's a spiritual thing. I mean, they've already accepted an eternal point of view. They've already accepted that's part of life. One day is to die, and the point was to live honorably and to die honorably. And so I think that all those things like that, when you get into categories like that and ways of thinking about just how you interact in this world and how you interact as a warrior, I mean, all that I think comes into play, because I think spirituality is that higher thought. It's a more objective way of thinking. It's a higher way of thinking. You cease to be all about you and about what you want, and we're living in a world, especially in this Western United States here, and in the United States in general, we're living in a world that seems to be all about me, and doesn't care about anyone else. But as warriors, I mean, the thing that runs deep in us all is that we do care enough to teach one another to raise up our children differently and to make them part of this and to give them this sense of community. And part of that is that Bushido code, that warrior code that runs deep in us all.
Now, Raven, let me ask you for a little bit of guidance to, what would you offer to the, members of the tribe or anybody listening to this interview who is interested in developing their spirituality into coming into their own? What are some of the lessons from your book? And I don't want you to give away too much, because I really encourage everyone to buy this book, because it was a great read. But give me, one or two things that you could offer up as advice to get people onto the path, and to get them, in the right direction to, acquiring what is their true spirituality.
First of all, I would like for them to get my book, not just because I'm trying to make money off of it, but, of course, that's nice too, but it explains a pretty good path in there, pretty much so. And I think that, I think you've got to consider and go back to a time. I mean, I think science and religion both agree that we all came from a common ancestor. They both agree that there was one human being somewhere. I mean, that's been proven by DNA and everything, but yet they all agree by the artifacts that have been found there, the stone flake tools, that they were from that Fertile Crescent. They're the fork of the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers, and so we know we came from a common ancestor. Therefore, if we come from a common ancestor, and if we're created beings, then at one time we did all believe the same way, and it was not until much later that all the different religions started developing. So I think that we got to consider, first of all, where is the unity in it? I cherry pick, what we I believe this, but I'm gonna reject that, and you got to find that unity that goes through all the belief systems, and then and I just believe that there needs to be a new consideration of looking at Jesus' teachings and looking at the apostles' teachings. I mean, get beyond the religious aspect of it, get beyond the titles, because I believe the Native American, they had their encounters with Christ on their own level. I don't know. How nobody knows, because they didn't have a written language. They just had oral traditions, but a lot of their oral traditions and stories also point to it. The fact too, Cherokee definitely believed in one God instead of many gods. And I think that as you look at how things are connected and look how the world failed. If you go far back in history, I think you got to consider this is that when people were hunter gatherers, that was probably the most balanced time that we have ever lived as human beings on this planet. We were connected to the food chain. We were more aware of food sources around us. We were created. We were more aware of the Creator's, going through everything. We realized this, that everything was connected. We realized if we picked too much of this plant, we wouldn't have it to eat again. If we killed too much of this animal, we wouldn't have them to eat again. So all things were connected. When we became, when people started getting real picky about it, like, well, why don't I just grow this plant because I like this plant and it tastes good, and then they started growing things, in a plot there, and then but for long, instead of hunting all these animals, and stuff, why don't I just domesticate them, bring them in, and and raise them for myself? But when that started happening, then it became more about us. It became more about okay, now, the guy down the street's crops don't do well, and he comes and tries to steal my crops, and I got to defend it. So there's the beginning of war. There's the beginning of division. There's the beginning of selfishness. And then it goes on and on. I mean, we had to store grain for the animals. The rats started eating the grain, and the bubonic plague came in as a result of the rats that wiped out 3/4 of the population in the old world. So I mean, I think you just need to take. My advice is take the journey back and just look at it and be objective and to see what the common elements are connected. Consider what Christ said that he's, and don't just try to get out of the religious aspect. Try to get the Christian name out of your mind. If that's what it takes, and just listen to what he says. Listen not to religious leaders, just listen to what he says and read it. And really consider it. Particularly, the book of John, and I'm not preaching here, but even the book of John, there was a man that his whole gospel is different than any other gospels, because it's just basically, he's talking about his relationship with Christ, and he doesn't just chronicle all the things that happen in his life like Luke did or one of the other ones, but he just really, and then you read in the book of Romans, and just how it's all connected, and why Christ did what he did, then things start coming into view, like a picture, be a photograph being developed, it just starts getting clear. So I think you got to pray for one thing. I think you got to pray and ask, God, call him what you want to call him Creator, call him whatever you want to call him, but approach him and openly and honestly say, guide me. And then, and then open the Bible up. Do not start in Genesis. The Bible is 66 books in one. Just start in the book of John or somewhere, so you don't have to read it from front cover to cover. You'll get bogged down in, all the rituals and stuff like that, because a lot of that's just history stuff, the stages that Israel went through to get the Word of God. So, a lot of that's not as important to you. Think about the things that are relevant. Consider Christ's teachings, and pray and just, and ask him for this experience to reconnect you, spiritually to him. The Christians call it being born again, but, I try to get away from all these theological terms. I think they divide us more than they unite us. But it's just basically just connect me back to you, God. Just show me the way. And I think that the more you read, the more open-mindedly and get all the religious coverings off of it, I think that you'll find it makes sense. And I think that you'll actually find yourself in a peace and a harmony, because you become more aware of I don't know, just of his presence. I think, I know that people are going to think I'm crazy, maybe some of them, but it's not the case. It's not what I'm talking about. You'll know, because your spirit's almost like your spiritual part of you is dead in most of us. We're very weak, and if we reconnect, then it's like things start making sense, because we have this spiritual guide now, God, Yahweh, Creator, whatever, that's coming alongside us and is guiding us and helping us understand things, and I just think that makes all the difference in the world. So I think if you're open-minded and you'll just approach the scriptures in that way, then I think it'll make all the difference in the world to you. Just try it and see what you think. Because it was a long journey for me, but that's the things that I arrived at. I explained a whole lot better in my book too. So I really encourage everyone to get the book. It's not expensive at all. You can. It's very inexpensive. And try it out and just, see what I say and see if it makes sense to you. I think an objective, open-minded person will agree that it makes sense.
Well, Raven, I want to thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to talk to us. please, before we go, can you tell the audience at home where they can find you, where they can reach out to you if they want to order some of your books, of which you have many? It's not just the book that we're discussing today. Or if they want to get in touch with you for the other type of training that you do, doing the wilderness and survival skills training, where can people find you on the web?
Central Hub is wayoftheraven.net. That's wayoftheraven.net. And that's my website, and it's pretty easy to navigate. There's a button there for books. There's blogs there that I do, connections to there. There's a connection to a calendar there of all these survival classes that I teach. And I'm mainly in the Southeast. I'm in North Carolina in the mountains. But I'd be willing to travel to someone was able to finance it, and if they wanted to teach them any type of survival training. And I teach survival from the aspect of what if you had no modern gear at all. I don't teach it from the doomsday aspect. I'm not waiting for a big bomb to drop or the EMP to hit. I just believe in readiness, preparedness, and to me it connects me to the earth, better too. And to me it's a spiritual experience. Like making a fire, bow and drill. I've had people tell me, why you want to do that for when you got a butane lighter? And I'm like Ernest T. Seaton, the founder of the Boy Scouts. He said, you're not talking about the fire down here. You're talking about the fire in here, pointing to his heart. So I mean, it carries over. But wayoftheraven.net is, that's the place to check right there, and it'll connect you to everything else.
Great. Well, thank you, Raven, for being on the show with us. We really appreciate you being on, and hopefully we can get you on in the future. I'd like to invite you back to definitely talk about the wilderness skills and survival skills, because that's a podcast all in of itself. So once again, sir, thank you very much for coming on with us.
That would be great. Thanks for inviting me on here. Glad to have been able to share.